The Lavender Odyssey by John W. Lavender. Chapter 4. Wilf's Sweat. Wilf Pelletier had been introduced to us by John Rayum. John was a young Métis Micah-el had taught to meditate and who had an interest in learning traditional indigenous ways. Wilf had co-authored a book, No Foreign Land, and had been well received by the community. He was also one of the co-founders of the Medicine Wheel and Shaman Conference in Alberta. Wilf agreed to oversee a sweat and vision quest at our place. We had scouted around for a possible location and erected 2 sweat lodge frames, each with a main sapling bough bent down and staked to the ground, with additional boughs staked and intertwined in between, forming a dome-like structure. On the appointed day, Wilf and a small party of us, mainly family members, began climbing the hill in front of the chalet, Lavender Mountain. We carried the necessary equipment, a spade, an axe, 2 buckets of water, a large bundle of blankets, and several tarpaulins. Wilf approved the site we had prepared and instructed us to dig a shallow pit in the center of each dome. Then we collected filled stones and firewood. We placed the stones in 2 piles, one for each of the sweat lodges, and built fires. We then covered the frames with blankets and tarpaulins. Wilf inspected every detail. He set aside gray blankets for the entrance, and last of all, a white Hudson Bay blanket with its distinctive black, yellow, and red stripes. At the center of this blanket was a black 8-pointed star. John Rayum was designated the firekeeper. He was disappointed that he would not sweat, but Wilf explained the important role of the firekeeper to him. "It's a service to the community and considered a great honor," Wilf said. The time for the sweat had arrived. Wilf instructed everyone to take off their clothes. There was a moment of embarrassment while disrobing, even though each one of us had brought a towel. What was private within the walls of our home was now public within the pines and birches. Wilf explained how we should enter the lodge and make our way around the fire pit in a clockwise direction. "This is the way of the earth and the sun," Wilf explained. He then added that some traditions circle in the other direction. What was important was to follow the instructions of the intercessor. 6 males, including Wilf, crawled into the first sweat lodge. The females entered the other lodge, sat on their towels, and waited for instructions. Sitting near the door so he could instruct both groups, Wilf pointed his feet towards the center of the dome. Then 4 stones were brought in one at a time on a pitchfork, glowing red, which immediately radiated heat on our waiting bodies. "Firekeeper, water." A bucket of water appeared through the door. Although it was not completely dark, due to the door flaps still being open, there was a sense that the space within the lodge was, for its inhabitants, the entire universe, a cosmic womb. Bringing something from the outside into this cosmos was like a new creation. As we waited, the atmosphere thickened. Wilf opened a long deerskin bag and pulled out a braid of sweetgrass. He lit the end with an old Zippo lighter and fanned the smoke over his head, face, and chest. Passing the incense to the person on his left, he gestured with his hand to do likewise. Everyone followed suit and then passed the sweetgrass to the next person. Wilf then drew out of his deerskin bag a long pipe stem, and a red pipestone bowl. Assembling the two pieces, he filled the bowl with a mixture of willow bark and herbs. Wilf lit the mixture and puffed until clouds of aromatic smoke filled the dome. Then, turning the pipe in a clockwise motion, he passed it to the next person. One by one we received the pipe, puffed, and then passed it on. After the pipe had completed one round, Wilf instructed the firekeeper to pull down the door flaps, and in the darkness the stones glowed like fresh lava. "Who are the rocks?" Wilf asked. He did not expect an answer. He then picked up a small cedar branch, dipped it into the bucket of water, and swatted the stones. Steam filled our lungs, and Wilf knew that these novices would suffer from the scalding moist heat until we let go of the pain and accepted the reward of spirit. To facilitate entry into spirit, Wilf allowed his energy to overflow through his hands and belly and spread outwards to touch each person in the lodge. "May the Great Spirit be with you, and may the water of life refresh you and heal you. May the ancestors accept your sacrifice, and may you live in peace. Homitakwasing." Wilf's sweat began to run, and he asked the group to pray. One of the adult members of the party began, and then stopped abruptly. There was a long pause before another voice broke the darkness. "More stones," Wilf called out through the door flap. The flap opened, and another red-hot stone appeared. Those who were sitting in the front near the entrance felt the heat immediately. The hot, moist air was becoming almost unbearable, forcing everyone to close their eyes. Sweat poured out of our pores and dripped onto one another. As the prayers continued, it became evident that there were some who were showing signs of distress as the prayers were becoming shorter. "How much longer?" a young voice cried out. Wilf, sensing the climax was near, began to tell a story to take their minds off their suffering. "The old men tell a story about the grandfathers," said Wilf. "They say a stranger came from the east and settled with the human beings. It was true that he had never been accepted because his ways were different. He decided to seek the guidance of an elder. The stranger told the old man that he was unhappy, and as the human beings had not accepted him, maybe he should move to another place. Perhaps there were other human beings more like him somewhere in the world. The elder explained that because he had no roots, he should stay where he was so that roots might grow. The stranger, in defiance and exasperation, resolved to sit where he was and not move until he died. The old man did not expect this reaction, and as it happened, the stranger was sitting in the center of the village. On the first day, the human beings ignored the stranger and politely went about their business. On the second day, they began to realize that something different was happening. They asked the stranger what he was doing, and if there was some way they could help him, but he did not reply. By the evening, the whole village was talking about the stranger and his strange ways. On the third day, they offered him food, but he refused to eat or drink. And on the fourth day, some of the human beings who were troubled in themselves came to the stranger and began telling him their problems. Even though he remained silent, the human beings felt comforted by their encounter with him. However, some young hotheads threw sticks and stones at him. By the fifth day, everyone in the village was worried. The sun had blackened the stranger's body, and sores appeared on his face and lips. Then about noon, when the sun was at its highest, he keeled over, his hands around his stomach as though he was in great pain. The old man, who had secretly been watching over the stranger, came to his aid, and with a little water coaxed him to drink. After a while, he persuaded the stranger to enter his lodge. While the old man was preparing food, he inquired about what had happened. The stranger said that he had been very angry at the human beings, but as the days went by, his anger melted. By the third day, he was even enjoying the attention that he was receiving. But by the fourth day, he noticed that the human beings were growing angry with him. Those who came to see him were troubled themselves and saw in him someone who physically looked like how they felt inside. On the fifth day, about noon, a dark shadow fell over the stranger, and he perceived the figure of a warrior on a horse behind him. The warrior was proud and dark. He was so dark that light did not reflect from him, but was absorbed into him. Even his horse was obsidian black. The black warrior demanded to know who had summoned him. He called the stranger a lump of dung and accused him of seeking power. And in disgust, he dismounted his horse and kicked the stranger in the stomach. That was when the stranger fell over. The old man said it was a good sign, and he would instruct him how to seek the meaning of his life. But before he could do that, the stranger must be given a new name. Then he must purify himself in the sweat lodge, so that the black warrior could not smell him. Homitakwewasan. Everybody in the sweat lodge was quiet after Wilf ended his story. One of us is seeking a vision, he said. I will prepare him, then he will go. Wilf turned to me. You must go from here to a deserted place. You will not eat or drink for 4 days and nights, and you will pray for a vision. Go, do no harm, and observe everything.